This episode is brought to you by Verve Super.
The super system was built by men for men.
It's an unfair game and no accident that women retire with 25% less than men on average.
Done playing by the rules not made for us.
Visit vervesuper.com.au.
Info provided as general. Read the PDS and TMD issued by ETSL at vervesuper.com.au and consider if right for you.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is Big Small Talk.
This is the podcast where we try to cover the entirety of the news cycle, from the serious to the frivolous, all in one place.
Because loving pop culture doesn't mean you don't understand politics.
And today we're talking about the LA protests, Sabrina Carpenter's album cover, Israel and Iran strikes, Indy Clinton hires a private investigator, AUKUS review, and Alex Cooper's documentary.
But before we begin today's episode, we would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're recording today, the Gadigal people, and pay our respects to elders past and present.
But before we get into the actual news, Hannah, what is your personal headline of the week?
I've had a big weekend again. I went out on Saturday night and went to my partner's younger sister's gig. It was
Very
really
cool.
fun. The more fun thing was actually I'm filming something very exciting with the ABC today, and they're here in the studio with us.
Yeah.
But they were doing some overlay before. This is less exciting. I think it's just my funny personal headline of the week. We were outside, and they sometimes do overlay footage where you just kind of, when you watch a docuseries or something on TV and they have that
B-roll.
the B-roll, the in-between stuff. And they were filming my phone screen and me just swiping Instagram. I was trying to play it cool. My algorithm was looking good. I was proud of my algorithm. And this text just pops up at the top of my phone from my partner that says, could have been something super sexy. It wasn't. It was, just had a tempura prawn roll at sushi, bit into it, pineapple inside. Innovative and divine, was surprisingly delicious. And I thought, wow, what? Four or 5 months into our relationship.
Were you stressed that the ABC is going to think you're a loser?
Yeah, I know. I wish, if it was like something like, whoa, sensual, like I'd be embarrassed, but I'd be like playing it cool midday on a Monday. But no,
so cute.
I saw that text and I thought, that is my relationship. And now I'm thinking about pineapple and sushi and what its role could be.
And I think if your partner's not giving you those sort of updates, get a new one.
Oh no, we do a 12 text in a row day, and we both have busy lives. But I texted him back and said, excuse me, that's just been filmed by the ABC. And he said, just let me know if you want a picture of my feet next time. I'll just send that through. So magical. What's your personal headline of the week?
This is what I know I've said this in other weeks, but I feel like there's so much exciting stuff happening in work that we can't quite say yet. Like, it's like in pipeline stuff. Yeah. And then like my personal life, it's like, yeah, like I guess I'm not passing the Bechdel test recently, but I'm obviously not going to like share that on a weekend. But I did, however, have two of my friends had a birthday lunch, fancy lunch, and it was bottomless. And I've never been to a more attentive bottomless in my life.
Responsible service of alcohol is the biggest criticism of bottomless brunches.
Well, usually they get watered down or like they take forever.
Yep.
This Attenzione in Redfern, shout out
to your RSA license.
They were trying to kill me on the weekend. And then, quite a fun idea, we went back to the girls' place afterwards, and they were like, we have a surprise for everyone. And the surprise was they'd got this air tasker to come and be a bartender for 2 hours, make cocktails for everyone for 2 hours.
Feeling illegal, but I'm like...
I was like, wait, that's crazy. And what was funny is I thought he was one of my friends had a new boyfriend that was there, and I thought it was one of the new boyfriend's friends. So I'm putting in hard yards to get to know this guy. I was like, this guy is so good for coming here. And I get to the end of this like hour-long conversation. I go, and how do you know them? And he goes, I'm from Air Tasker.
And he probably felt so special. And you tipped.
I was like, what the fuck? And walked away.
That's awesome, Sarah. That's actually, I love that. Putting in the yards, you know his whole background. I was
trying to be so nice.
Aspirations, dreams. You asked his opinion on tariffs, I'm sure. Like,
well, I could have. I wish I could remember. I wish I knew anything I said that night.
It's very funny.
All right, let's get into the news.
Let's get into the news. Los Angeles protests have continued and Trump hosted the largest military parade in decades. None of this is normal.
I feel like this happened the day after we recorded our last episode. And then between even the last episode and even putting the question box up, it felt like 1,000 years had happened in the news cycle, and suddenly like Sydney Sweeney's bathwater felt ridiculous to ask about.
Yes, completely. And now there's a curfew in place. There is so much happening. There are clashes. Gavin Newsom, the California governor, has gone...
Sorry, the Gavin, did you see his TikTok?
Do you mean the
fuck around and find out?
Did he say that?
Oh, he put on his TikTok, he reposted one of the Pop Brave tweets about like how he was going to stand up to Trump. And so he put it on TikTok with a slide. And the next slide was like a meme photo of a guy in front of a whiteboard that just said, fuck around and find out.
Oh my God. I didn't say, I mean, but this is where we're at with politicians who were once quite, I mean, diplomatic. I think he's still being diplomatic, but like there's less constraints now in the current political landscape around like basic etiquette too.
Yes.
Because Trump has none. So they're responding. And it's quite interesting to see like the Democrats have gone from very weak-willed. Like, you know, when Trump was first there and they all started wearing pink shirts and saying like liar. And it was like, is this the best you've got?
Yeah.
We need a better offensive here. What the fuck is going on? And I think now at least people like Gavin Newsom are stepping up, even though there's many people on the left who I've been reading about his opinion within California. He's highly criticised. But again, it's kind of like that idea of Gavin Newsom's opposition to Trump is a good thing, but he's still very far from what people want the Democrats to be as well in many ways.
He was pretty harsh on Trump, which everyone was pretty supportive of. And then he went on a podcast, right, and was like saying some pretty right-wing stuff, trying to appeal more to moderates, and that kind of got a lot of people offside again. And then this has happened and he's come out really strong against Trump again. And the joke is online. It's just like, this is it's like I'm in a very emotionally abusive relationship with Gavin Newsom.
Yes, no, completely. I saw it. It's really interesting seeing from left-wing people. I saw this comment on a TikTok in a string of very critical comment sections about him. One said, Gavin Newsom hates two things, homeless people and Republicans, and he's all out of homeless people right now. It's like, so there's very much this, like, he is barely a moderate, but he's just anti-Trump because that is the thing to be right now as a Democrat. And it's so interesting to see that kind of rhetoric where like the left are clearly very unhappy with him, but he's all they've got right now too in that sort of space. So we should talk about the curfew. Yeah. The curfew that's been put in place. So a citywide curfew on LA was imposed from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. beginning on the 11th of June. And I believe it's still ongoing as we speak. And it's basically 1 square mile of downtown Los Angeles. And it applies to all residents, all visitors, with the exception of essential workers, emergency personnel, and individuals experiencing homelessness. Violations of the curfew will result in fines or arrest under emergency powers of LA. And the mayor, Karen Bass, stated the curfew is intended to protect peaceful protesters and prevent further violence. So the conversation that's happening about the justification for this curfew is this idea that the mayor is arguing that it's people outside of these curfew hours who are bad faith actors who would be using the protests as an opportunity not to advocate but to instill bad behaviour in an opportune moment because of the kind of disruption and unrest that's occurring. So they're trying to prevent that. But at the same time, it's hard to see a curfew as anything other than like a violation of people's rights in many ways too. A lot of protesters are saying they've been staying out in defiance and saying it's their First Amendment right and that police enforcement are applying this new ruling selectively. Now, we also talked about the National Guard and the Marines last week.
Yes, what are they doing?
Yes, so Trump authorised the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to LA, and there'd only been about 300 when we spoke last week actually deployed, and it was kind of coming in waves. Marines are not directly being involved in policing, but there are approximately 150 Marine personnel who have been embedded in what's being described as logistics and strategy roles alongside the National Guard and the LAPD force. This is kind of being described, again, propaganda, as like a temporary stabilization measure, which is really just oppression, suppression of protest and voices here, because we know, and this is what will happen, the media will highlight and really place pressure and attention on anything that is violent when we know the majority of protesters are peaceful, and we need to remember that as well. So what the National Guard are currently doing is manning barricades, enforcing curfew on particular zones of downtown LA, and they're assisting in operational planning. Apparently, they're not conducting arrests or any direct engagement, but again, like that's quite hard to say as a blanket rule that hasn't happened. I think it's also important to focus on the level of injuries that we've seen so far. So I believe at least over the weekend, the count is 47 civilians have sustained injuries over 2 nights alone of protest activity. This is facial bruising, chemical burns, head trauma from like projectiles.
They've been using tear gas as well, right?
And reporters, we saw another ABC reporter shot with a rubber bullet.
Did you see that like Vox Pop interview with someone who had suffered from the tear gas? And they were like, what was it like? And he was like, smells like fascism or something like that.
Smells like fascism.
Yeah, and that went viral. Like,
of course, genius, right? I mean, Again, someone in an incredibly traumatic situation responding with something that is going to get people activated and mobilized. There was a 23-year-old college student who was hospitalized with a fractured jaw after being struck by a rubber bullet. This is serious injuries. We know journalists from The Guardian, NBC News, Univision have reported being shoved, detained or hit with riot control agents while covering the protests. Again, clearly displayed press. Press freedom is under deep question in LA right now.
Going back to Gavin Newsom for a second, what has he actually said except for fuck around and find out?
Yeah, so there's quite an in-depth interview with him on the New York Times podcast, The Daily. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to us also listen to that podcast, but if you haven't listened, it's quite interesting. He obviously condemns President Trump's decision to deploy federal troops. He says it's a brazen abuse of power, a defining moment for democracy. Gavin Newsom also talks about filing for a temporary restraining order in federal court to block the deployment of the Marines, of the National Guard. He also expressed serious concerns over the ICE raids generally. He talks about undocumented residents being arrested during their daily life activities, such as attending parental appointments. And he also talks about, his daughter coming home from school, hearing a rumor that Trump was going to arrest him. And he basically argues, and this is what is really getting to me, is the lack of sort of offensive attack from the Democrats. It's purely defensive and reactionary to Trump. And he argues that the Democrats must get on the offensive rather than simply being a reactionary body to whatever the Trump administration decides to enact.
Can we get an update on what actually happened with the ICE raids, or if they've stopped yet?
So ICE has temporarily suspended operations in the area in Los Angeles right now. So according to the agency, this includes a pause on immigration-related arrests in proximity to the demonstrations, and it's trying to avoid escalating tensions. But again, Gavin Newsom reports a dramatic increase in ICE activity elsewhere in California. So they've just moved the targeted zone.
Right.
So this is not that, we've heard and we're responding and we're stopping. It's literally, that's a big point of pressure and public attention. Let's move it.
Can I also ask, I know it makes sense geographically, but why just LA right now? Or is it happening everywhere and it's just getting out of control with the protests in LA?
I think it is happening in lots of places, but I think the interesting part about LA and California as a state is they're a blue state. I mean, LA has a higher immigrant population, but you're going to see a response in these areas because they're also more progressive. So they're going to stand up, fight back. There have been so many stories, and Gavin Newsom has highlighted quite a few of them, of children being left alone because their mother and father have been taken. And what does the future look like for a child in that circumstance? But this is people who are being kidnapped, who are being abducted, who are being disappeared.
But also
in their
children
daily life.
are being taken.
Yes. And it's terrifying. The other thing I wanted to mention about this, which is quite interesting, is that Trump ordered a stop on raids for farms, restaurants, food service workplaces. And the important thing to understand there is that the reason for that is because a lot of Republican lobbyists and donors are seeing massive issues with supply chains and product delivery from those industries because they have higher immigrants in the workforce. And so we need to remember that when we're talking about this, Donald Trump is not deporting immigrants because he thinks they're illegal aliens. Donald Trump is choosing who to deport based on the workforce and the economic viability of certain industries and where those people work.
Monstrous, but also a really interesting part of this that I've seen as well. Obviously, this has got a huge reaction online. So much pressure on anyone with a platform over there to say something about it.
I've been noticing this in every comment section too.
Especially if you're an influencer or a public figure in LA, but really anywhere in the States and around the world right now.
Good.
But then on the flip side, it's interesting because, for example, Kim Kardashian said something and it caused a lot of controversy because she was like, this needs to stop. And it was like, well, no one actually knows who Kim voted for in this election, but people that maybe were giving off the vibe or have said that they were voting Trump in the election now saying no to ICE. And it's like they're also getting in trouble for that because it's like, well, this is what you voted for. And it's a really interesting discussion online of like, we want everyone to say something, but you also are going to have to let people who maybe voted for Trump also come to their own realizations and not push that aside and get mad at them for coming to that, but actually encourage like, yeah, this is out of control.
Yeah.
So I actually don't know what people want out of that as well, but I do think everyone should be speaking up. And I understand that's a whole conversation of like, well, we don't want to be hearing political stuff from influencers, but I think this is so far beyond that.
Oh, of course. And it's just sort of fascinating to watch I didn't sign up for this conversation play out when in fact you did. And, he was transparent that this was in his plan.
Project 2025
was the playbook. It was the blueprint. And it's kind of just so shocking, but also not at all, because we go, yeah, you were warned, and he was able to distance himself and you believed him. And in a way, it's like, it's just very hard to be sympathetic and empathetic for those causes when people were just voted in their own individual interest, and now that they're actually seeing it play out and the effect and the damage.
Shocked and confused.
Yeah. Thoughts and prayers won't do it this time.
Sabrina Carpenter's new album has turned online feminist discourse on its head this week. Let's talk about it. I think most of our question box this week was asking if we were going to speak on it. Yes, obviously.
Biggest story of the week in pop culture.
And it does feel eerily close to the line of questioning we had last week with the whole Sydney Sweeney discussion.
I found it almost, I'm sure you're going to get into this, but proximity of these two stories difficult to have to distinguish what I think on each and how they compare.
Because there are a lot of, like in a Venn diagram, there are similar conversations and themes in this, but I do think they're very different.
Separate, completely.
Very, very different. But first things first, Sabrina Carpenter has announced a new album.
Yay.
For any Sabrina Carpenter music fans. Great news. And it's coming out August 29th. But what's been making headlines is the album cover, which is Sabrina on all fours in heels and a mini dress, her hair sort of held like a leash by presumably a man who's like unseen man out of the photo. And obviously the internet's exploded. It was called regressive. People requested an entirely new album cover from her. I don't know if you could do that to artists.
You can request.
You can
inquire.
You can inquire. And I have about 1,001 different thoughts on this. I actually don't even know what my final definitive conclusion on this is yet. I'm hoping we find it together by the end of this.
Let's stay playful together.
Let's go on a journey together. I think it's one of the most interesting stories because we have to hold space for multiple truths at once in this.
And no one seems to be able to do that as a starting point.
No, and that's what makes this an interesting story, because you say that and people are like, no, we can't. But I do think this one you kind of have to. But first I'm going to start with just pointing out that I think, separate to this entire conversation, I think for background on Sabrina, she's extremely intelligent. You can see that in her lyrics. You can see that in her interviews. You can see that in her Christmas special, her adverts. She has a usually great sense of humor. It's very witty and she's very quick with it. And she's incredibly dry with her delivery. She is entirely sarcastic almost all the time. But I also think her music explores my favorite conundrum, which is that she finds boys incredibly stupid but is still attracted to them. And I feel like that has resonated across the globe. And I think this is interesting. Her music is the opposite of timeless music.
Yeah.
Like timeless music is like themes that, transcend, and like we could listen to it in 20 years and it still feels like, oh, that sums up what a relationship or love feels like. Sabrina's music could almost be studied as this like snapshot of the cultural trends and modern dating for right now.
Yep.
A really good example of that is her song, and I have seen people say this, like Dumb and Poetic. When she released it, it was off the back of that whole therapy speak conversation and men weaponizing the soft boy aesthetic. And then, Bad Reviews and Please, Please, Please also sort of encapsulated that like irritation with dating. And then she released her new single, Man Child, which is also such a trend right now to call out boys for throwing like tantrums. That's kind of going off the manosphere right now. It's quite like political. That's Peter Pan syndrome. Like it is very current. And there is something very clever about her ability to do that. And then we get to the point, which I know a lot of people are saying online, that yes, it is satire. Like Sabrina's whole aesthetic is very satirical. I read in Vogue, in the Man-Child music video, she bathes with pigs, rolls her eyes at performative masculinity, and exaggerates every feminine trope until it becomes absurd. She's not pandering to the male gaze, she is mocking it, and doing so with a self-aware nod to the fact that she's played into it too. Have you seen the music video for Man-Child yet?
Yes, I have.
Do you think that's like indicating what this next album is going to be like?
Because I think my entire opinion relies on the fact that we need to step back and realize that this is a comment before an album. And of course, and I think when we're having this discussion, every comment section is terrified of grey area and nuance. You're either one camp or the other. But I think there's a few different contexts to reference, is my opinion. The first context is we don't know the full album, but we know Sabrina's career to date and the way that she tries to center the female gaze, right?
Which is why I'm going back on this, because I think if you aren't a Sabrina Carpenter fan, this is important stuff to know about her.
Yeah.
Like in saying that, like she used to do these nonsense outros at every concert where she would like say something like ludicrous at the end of every time she sung Nonsense, depending on which city she was in. And like that copped a lot of backlash at the time because it was pretty overtly sexual. And then also her Juno positions. I know she did the Eiffel Tower position during one and that caused a lot of outrage. But they are also a joke. But I think the other thing to talk about when we're discussing this with Sabrina Carpenter is the fact that her aesthetic is really to dress like a sexy baby all the time.
And people say that centering the female gaze and that she does kind of like sexy for women. But I don't agree with that because
it's just interesting.
She is hot to men. Like, I actually find that quite frustrating because while her music, and I am a big fan, her music is very aimed at in-jokes for women and dating culture. Exactly like you said, she's very zeitgeisty. She knows what she's doing. She's a genius. The second piece of this is like, she's still a hot white girl who's tiny and exactly what the male gaze demands.
She's pint-sized.
Yes.
She's literally 5
Polly
foot.
Pocket. Like, she is that pure male gaze as well.
But then, see, I've had this conversation with like friends before and I've always been of like, oh, that's so interesting. I've never seen it for the male gaze with her. And I think it's because I'm picking up on the fact that she's doing a spin-off off being like a Betty Boop kind of 50s style aesthetic. So for me, that still felt for the female gaze because I was like, boys don't even get that fashion. Like they're not even understanding what's happening right now.
Well, it's interesting too because Soph, who I work with one day a week, she suggested after having a conversation with her sister about this very topic, does that mean that the only difference between the female and the male gaze is whether women decide it's slutty and for men?
Fantastic think
Isn't
piece.
that an interesting point though? Because when we're thinking about Sabrina, isn't it just whether girls like you then?
Yeah. Ultra feminine, which is what she's leaned into. Whereas like if she was to come out in like BDSM-y leather, push-up lace bra, we would be like, no, that's the male gaze.
That's what I mean. That's when women decide it's slutty rather than fun for us too.
Which brings me now to the flip side, which is, yes, to me, this album cover is just a leveling up of the satirical nature of Sabrina's humor and aesthetic. And I feel like yourself and many of us saw that and actually got the joke immediately. Not the joke, but got the reference, got the point immediately. Like when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, weird, but she's like reclaiming the idea of like bitch and is making reference to the way women are being treated like dogs. Did I think it was provocative? Yes. And did I, knowing Sabrina, immediately digest the sarcasm? Yes. Does that mean I agree with it? Not necessarily.
No. And I think the first thing I come back to with this now, and I've been thinking about it a lot over the weekend, and my opinion has changed. It's gone back and forth quite a lot. When I instantly saw the photo, I went, fuck, that's jarring. That is a bad choice.
Yeah.
And I knew instantly, Man's Best Friend, the title of the album immediately clicks you in to the fact that she's making a comment about being perceived as a bitch, being perceived as a pet, submission. And I think that that's really important to go, okay, the literacy element here goes, if you know Sabrina and you know the album and you know the title, you can understand what this is going to be.
Yeah.
The intention, good. The impact, bad.
The execution, bad. But I think even after explaining to someone who doesn't know Sabrina's music or is a guy that's not across this or whatever it is, that like, oh no, that's just classic Sabrina and she's being sarcastic, is like, okay, but even so, you're not reading the room right now. Women's autonomy is under threat globally. We have rates of femicide in Australia that are through the roof. Roe v. Wade is like the fallout of that in the States is still massive. The Diddy trial is unfolding and like the key evidence is Cassie being pulled by her hair. The conservative push, like all of that is really unsettling. And so the timing could not have been worse.
No.
We don't need to be like...
That's what I mean. Like, there's all this context. There's the context of the album and her career. Then there's the context of the global political environment.
Yeah.
And also, at the end of the day, this is a marketing campaign that has worked as designed. They knew that they were going to get this conversation going with this cover, but the damage that comes with that, like I saw it and I was like, I would never do this. I don't support this. Do I understand it? Yes. Do I see the damage it's going to do? Also, yes. Do I want to condemn her and say I hate her and she's done the worst thing ever?
No, I don't. And again, I think this is a big part of the conversation, but I also don't want to fall into the bucket of like, assuming everyone's stupid because I don't think that's fair either.
I don't think it gives a lot of young women agency.
I don't think but it's also not young women usually I'm actually concerned about in this. It is that wider demographic
too.
That unfortunately right now media literacy is at an all-time low. Yep. So if you're going to make a statement that requires nuance and an emotional intelligence level, like you're going to have to be really obvious with it. And I know that's not fair, But right now, you do have to be because people aren't getting it. We're seeing that time and time again. People are not getting it. Art that is subtle is going over people's heads.
No, I think this is completely right. If you're going to take a risk like this, you need people to understand it to a deep level. And, you know, I've heard a lot of people suggest, like all my friends, our group chat was automatically like, imagine if she was pulling the hair of a man on the cover. Imagine if it was a roles reversal, like something that made it more explicit.
Yeah.
There's so many options and ways of doing it. And I'm expecting a secondary like wave of this marketing campaign where there is like more to this and we're all kind of hoodwinked. But at the same time, the damage has been done and the conversation has already occurred. So it's kind of interesting and I'm keen to see what happens from here because I don't want to condemn her. I just think this was not the right choice.
And I get that it's annoying that she would constantly need to explain herself. I don't think men would have to do that in the same way with their art. But yeah, I think it's just upset other women a lot with this because it's like, not now. Fucking not now.
That's exactly it. I'm kind of like, I feel bad because I think that there is a creative choice that's been made here that is kind of an interesting discussion, but ultimately the harm that's caused far outweighs that.
Also, we need to mention really briefly the Rolling Stone cover and cover story.
Saw that.
So in the midst of all of this, she put out a cover of Rolling Stone and she's naked in it. She's wearing like thigh-high stockings. But she actually addressed in the interview, sort of, this whole thing. She said, it's always funny to me when people complain. They're like, all she does is sing about this. But those are the songs you've made popular. Clearly you love sex. You're obsessed with it.
That's interesting.
Right? Oh, and then they asked her, like, who was Man-Child about? And she replied, your dad. Sorry, it's funny.
That's funny. That's funny.
But I also want to say a lot of people were getting upset because they thought that sort of sexy baby aesthetic was also a spin-off Lolita.
Yeah, problematic. So deeply.
Obviously problematic. That's like a hypersexual story of a child and her stepfather. It's sexual assault. But I don't know if it, like, I'm happy to hear people's thoughts on this because I'm still like looking into it. I don't think it was a direct reference to Lolita. I think it's a continuation of the aesthetic she's been doing for years now. And yes, because of that time period being like the 50s or whatever, it's like probably crosses over with aesthetics from Lolita, but I don't think that was intentional. I will say, however, where's the outrage for Lana Del Rey's song called Lolita? But I think to say this is setting women back and it's all Sabrina's fault is ultimately harsh. And I do think that the album is going to 1000% be kind of like contradicting gender tropes and stereotypes. I hope so. Yeah, I'm excited to hear everyone else's thoughts on this.
Yes.
Did we even come to a definitive answer on that?
No, but I
timing.
But I think the point is there is no definitive answer and that this is unfortunately still an interesting discussion. I wish it didn't have to happen, but it's also like it's easy to make her the scapegoat and the ultimate like highlight here, but there's also a conversation to be had about all of the men that will love this and that ultimately it's about the men who have oppressed women. And she has just played into that, unfortunately, rather than challenging it.
I think being upset about the timing and being upset about like worried that people aren't going to get the media literacy in a climate like this is fair enough. But I think you can also sit with why am I so uncomfortable with this?
There's a broader conversation about feminism through hypersexuality to be had here, which sort of sits the wrong way with me and a lot of people. But this feels like a 10 years ago subversive album cover, not a 2025 feminist album cover. This episode is brought to you by Verve Super.
Women in Australia retire with 25% less retirement savings than men.
And it's not just a number.
It's the financial equivalent of always getting less. Less freedom, less security, less choice.
Imagine it's like working an extra 11 years just to retire with the same balance.
Or like getting promoted to the same role as your male colleague, but with 1 week less annual leave every year forever.
Fed up with women being sidelined financially, Verve Super was built to change the game. It's the first ethical super fund created to close the gap for women and gender diverse people.
Progress doesn't come from following the rules.
It comes from breaking them and creating something better.
Done playing by the rules not made for us?
Visit vervesuper.com.au.
Info provided as general. Read the PDS and TMD issued by the ETSL at vervesuper.com.au and consider if right for you.
On Friday, Israel launched multiple strikes across Iran and they responded. Now we are multiple days into widespread attacks.
This is terrifying.
It is so terrifying, and we do not want to detract from the continued genocide happening against Palestinians, but this is just a new wave of unrest of leading to like widespread regional tensions, which could lead to war in the Middle East, which the US is a major player in.
I think whenever other countries get involved, it's terrifying, but also Iran has a lot of military and potentially nuclear capabilities.
Yes, and that's what we're going to touch on a bit today, and this will be something that will be ongoing coverage. I don't think this is going to stop in the next few weeks, so we will continue to give you updates as well. But I want to talk about what happened happened with the initial launches on Friday. So Israel successfully targeted Iran's nuclear and military hubs. They wiped out a lot of scientists and heads of the sort of military facilities there. It was the biggest attack on Iran since the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s. Iran and Israel have had, it would be undercutting to say, a tense relationship that's been marred by so much conflict since the Iranian Revolution of the late 70s, 79, when Iran became the first Islamic republic. If you remember back to last year, there were also a series of attacks and strikes between Iran and Israel that sort of quietened, and now we are going again. There's so much history to unpack here. We're not going to be able to do it in a 5 to 10 minute segment. But in the current context, what's really important to understand is why the timing of this escalation is vital. So Iran is currently in quite serious negotiations with the US over Tehran's nuclear program that was only established this year. Now, one of the pieces I read on this was published in The Conversation by Ali Mamouri, who's a research fellow at Deakin University on Middle East Studies. And what he wrote was that Iran has accumulated around 400 kilos of uranium enriched to 60% purity. And what he says is if this uranium is enriched to 90% purity, it would be enough to build 9 to 10 bombs.
Right.
And the day before Israel's attack, this IAEA board of governors, which we were just talking about, who are like the UN's watchdog for this particular area, they also declared Iran to be in breach of their non-proliferation obligations. And that's for the first time in more than 20 years, I believe. This is what the article tells us, that Iran had previously agreed to caps for that enrichment under a joint action plan. There was a nuclear deal between Iran, the US, other countries, which Trump abandoned in 2018. Media outlets have also reported, which is important here, that Trump urged Netanyahu not to attack Iran, as he believed he was close to finalising this deal. Now Trump is obviously praising Israel's strikes publicly, saying that that's not the case, and threatening Iran as well as praising Israel. Obviously, the US cannot be perceived as a mediator here, really, because they have clear bias.
Yeah.
The other big piece of news in the last couple of days is that US officials told CNN that Trump vetoed a plan that Israel put forward to kill Iran's supreme leader. Iran's just responded to Israel by basically projecting every missile, all of the weaponry they have, going hard, knowing that these tensions with the US and these negotiations are struggling right now. They are just putting forward this like clear mentality that they have the weaponry that they do, and it's very terrifying. So this is hundreds of ballistic missiles which have been launched. They've hit Tel Aviv in Israel, and Iran has been incredibly forward in their views that they have a goal to destroy Israel.
They want to demolish Israel.
Yes. And one of the biggest questions that's basically being asked right now is, how long can this go on? There's another piece of analysis I was reading in Al Jazeera this morning from a writer called Dorsa Jabari, who says that Iran is believed to have the largest missile program in the Middle East. Now, of course, Iran won't want to attack the US directly because of their defense and military program. Like, they have the biggest defense force in the world.
Well, that was my thing. Surely, would the US ever send troops?
Of course, because of their allies, but also Iran's not going to attack the US, basically, is what's being said. Like, Iran could. But this is all on the table. But another important piece of this puzzle is it's not just weaponry that we're looking at. There is a lot of economic resources available here. For example, Iran has threatened to close a particular strait, the Strait of Hormuz, which lies between Iran and Oman. And what they could do is stop millions of barrels of oil transiting. And what that would do is drive up oil prices. Iran could put the rest of the world in certain positions and through these blockades that would have massive economic detriment around the world. But there's also a high death toll right now. As of Monday, I believe 224 people were killed in Iran and 14 in Israel. Have you seen it's so scary to watch this live streamed. Like, my reels right now look like genuinely people filming from rooftops, from weddings, from just like home, missiles striking centers of cities.
I know. Do you know what, actually? Like, because the news has been so horrific, I actually haven't been going on TikTok because it's not comic relief or like lighthearted in the slightest. It is like terrifying. ICE raid followed by Israel, followed by Sabrina Carpenter. But all of it is so intense.
And we talk about this all the time. Like, this podcast is fundamentally about balancing out, interesting conversations, social conversations, fun conversations. But going onto this tiny screen on your phone, it has never been more jarring.
Yeah, I found it really jarring this week. And I feel and for me to find that who works in this space, and not that I'm desensitized at all to it, but I'm expecting of it. And I found it really jarring.
It's terrifying. So over the next few weeks, we'll continue to discuss this and how it evolves.
Time to deactivate your burner account. Indy Clinton has hired a private investigator to find the true identities of all her online trolls. I didn't even consider this as an option of something you could do, but of course you can.
I'm interested to see what kind of a trend this sets off, basically.
Yeah, holy hell. So TikTok megastar Indy Clinton has decided that after years of enduring trolls online, to hire a private investigator. It actually happened a few weeks ago, but really to uncover exactly who all the anonymous, horrendous keyboard warriors are and find the information it's not actually to expose them. I don't think she's going to be dropping their names online, but really, she now knows who all of them are. And I'll start off, if you actually don't know who Indy Clinton is, she's an extremely popular Australian influencer known for her very chaotic mum content. I love watching Indy Clinton. She has 3 kids. They are all ridiculously cute. You really feel very involved every time you watch something of theirs.
Yes.
It's one of those few names that I could throw out in a circle of friends and everybody be like, oh, did you see this week?
Yes.
This happened. But she has been trolled relentlessly this year. And it's not really for anything that she's done wrong or anything scandalous. It's because she got a nose job.
I have been following Indy Clinton for a while, and this nose job before and after seems to be the defining point in her reputation between being one of Australia's biggest and most loved influencers and being one of the most hated women on TikTok.
It has been shocking and also somewhat fascinating to watch the way everyone has turned on her because they don't like her nose job.
What is... I think the broader, I don't know if maybe I'm reading too much into it, would be a classic for me in the pop culture stories to be like, and let's overanalyze this.
No, please.
But I think for me, having watched it, I think a bad comment section emboldens all of us to have bad thoughts. Do you ever find that? Where you might watch something and then you have an opinion and then you look at the comment section and you see if the first 5 to 10 agree with you or not.
Yes.
And you can feel yourself begging to shift almost with, you can feel how social media has impacted your perception of a mob mentality. And sometimes you have to actually push to work out whether something is your opinion or the shift of the collective.
I think a lot of people are actually quite comfortable to admit that they'll see a video, be unsure, and then reference the comment section to decide.
When it is actually never going to be the collective opinion, is going to be the most inflammatory of either side.
It's going to be the loud minority who are feeling emboldened enough to make that first comment.
And you know what I think about Indy, right? She is the beauty standard. As far as mums go, what mother of 3 under the age of 5 or 6 or whatever it is has a 6-pack like she does? It's crazy terrifying. She's been open that she's had surgery on her breasts. She's been open about cosmetic procedures. And what
she was also very open about the nose job. She wasn't hiding anything.
No. I don't think that's the case at all. What I think with the nose job is that people tend to follow someone they idolize in looks or in behavior or in job or whatever it may be. And for Indy, it's she's hot and she's a mum. And with the nose job, what I felt happened was people were jealous but following Indy because they aspired to look and be like her. But as soon as the nose job went wrong, it went from being we love Indy to you are the most beautiful and you got something that went wrong. There's the big argument that it's been botched and that it doesn't look good. And then it's empowered people to say, kind of told you so, or you deserve it, or you've fallen from your throne.
I think there's a few different things here. I agree. Before the nose job, she had the sort of nose that people would go in and request.
Yes.
Anyway. So she already had this ideal beauty standard. And so her going and wanting to change that about herself, people took as a very personal attack of well, if you didn't even think you were beautiful, what does that all say about? I feel people took it very personally.
I took it personally, if I'm being honest,
yeah.
as a follower of her.
And to get that smaller ski slope nose, whatever it is, that's what she wanted. And whatever, if that's what you wanted, fine. But I think people freaked out because she did look different. Like it actually did change how she looked. And for
also
some
said-
reason people were like, I don't recognize you anymore.
Yeah, it's also important to say, I believe there was something like a deviated septum or some reason she wanted to go in as well. So there was a partial like health medical reason she needed to get that.
Now, if you go to the comment section of any video that she's on, including one posted yesterday, like I was on her account this morning just before, as I was preparing for this, and the top comment still, after all of this, was, I miss the old nose, to which she's replied, same, broken heart emoji.
It's quite mean. It's mean spirited and it's bad
It's
faith.
also like you commenting that as if she doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's been the only conversation on all of her videos for months now. She even says in the video that someone, that is the top comment on, I know I look different, stop commenting on other people's bodies.
Yep.
And then another thing I saw when I was looking at her account was she actually did a meet and greet like a little while ago. And she says in the video before going, and it's almost a throwaway comment, where she's like, oh, I'm going to a meet and greet. I've never really done stuff like this before. And I really hope that they are fans there and not trolls.
It's really mean. That's really scary, isn't it?
I've got 5 security guard.
Oh, God.
It has gone way too far. Anyway, she did actually share a little while ago that she'd been working with a private investigator for a few months to figure out who these people were that were leaving all of these terrible comments. Sort of said the anonymous accounts and faceless trolls will be held accountable. And she's not kidding, because then what she's revealed is that she has dug up plenty of dirt on them, including like their ABN numbers, their birth hospitals, their tattoo designs, their gynos. And she said the most common thread between all of them, they're all mothers.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's
not surprising to
actually
me.
not surprising.
It's surprising to me.
And that's why I think it is such a projection. But then, yeah, also like, again, if you're waiting on that big name and shame explosive content, I don't think she's going to do that and post their names online. But she has sort of sent the warning out with her with a glass of wine holding the 62-page document that has all the information in it. And that she just says that she wants to use this to raise awareness for cyberbullying and defamation in general to show that there will be repercussions. I don't actually know what these repercussions are going to be, though.
No, I don't think there are repercussions. I think it's fear. I think
That,
what
like,
she's
you're
doing.
not anonymous.
No, you're not. And I think that, obviously I have personal experience with this where I have been sent so many threats and so many horrible comments. And there are horrible comments that are, I might find hurtful that are actually really valid and interesting criticism, but the majority are like threats of violence made by men against me and blah, blah, blah. And I would love the feeling of being able to say, like, I know who you are. I know where you work. I could send an email to your employer right now. And sometimes I can and sometimes I do. But I understand that like what really is powerful is taking back that control and saying like, you don't just get to hide behind an account. If I'm exposing myself and putting myself in the arena of making, producing and publishing content about myself, you don't get to sit there and attack me and not have some accountability or at least fear that you're also going to be exposed.
Yeah.
The $368 billion submarine agreement is now being reviewed by Trump's administration. What could go wrong? Now, let me just say from the top, you're going to hear this, you might think, oh my God, so gendered. But I really believe it and I think we need to talk about this. Sometimes certain news topics are deemed boy topics or girl topics. Do you feel like this?
Oh, yeah.
Like if I go to the boyfriends of my friend group and I go, AUKUS, what do you think? Fucking hell, I will not stop hearing about AUKUS. Me personally, I'm like, the expensive submarines, hate. And then I move on with my day, right? But I often think that women are like, sort of categorized as like only talking about social issues, where there's like military defense security is considered like boy topic.
Well, like it's that same like boys like living their dreams when they were younger of like running around their garden playing with like toy guns and whatever, and
Roman Empire
like,
sort of shit.
It is 100% Roman. Like I have not, I can safely say, ever in my day gone, I wonder how the submarines going.
But so I wanted to say that at the top because I wanted to pique your interest after saying AUKUS. I know everyone's going, oh, Jesus, here we go.
I love learning about it so that when someone is talking about it, I have something to contribute and they get whiplash. And
That's what I want. I want, if you're going to drinks on Friday and the boys in your fucking group are going to be like, oh, the submarines, I want you to be able to whip this out and be like, and here's what I reckon, right? So we're going to go through this.
Interesting, John. Elaborate.
And we're going to not let this be a boy topic, basically, okay? As
I'm putting my lip.
I'm watching you put your Summer Fridays lip gloss on. Shout out Summer Fridays. I love that shit.
Yep.
Okay. Let's go back to what AUKUS is. AUKUS was a 2021 policy. Scott Morrison era, you may remember just so fondly, right? It was between PM Scott Morrison, US President Joe Biden, and UK Prime Minister of the time, Boris Johnson.
This was Scott Morrison's like thing. He cared a lot.
And we cared to hate him, So now trilateral, the three nations coming together. It's a defense and tech partnership between the three countries, and it was a response to changing security in the Indo-Pacific region.
AKA scared of China.
Thank you. You are genius. That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Correct. Concerns about China's military buildup, particularly in the South China Sea, cyber espionage, and economic coercion strategies. These are the big ticket items that we were like, okay, we need to get into an agreement and kind of protect and sort of reinvigorate this shared values, this shared partnership. It's all about positioning trust and renewed allyship and relations between the three countries, right? The centrepiece of AUKUS is the nuclear-powered submarine agreement, which gives Australia access to nuclear propulsion technology. And this is something that's only previously been between the UK and the US. So under this agreement, Australia would purchase at least 3 and possibly up to 5 US-built submarines beginning in the 2030s and co-develop and co-produce a new class of submarines using British design and American nuclear propulsion systems. These would be built in Adelaide and Barrow-in-Furness. The submarines will be nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed. Don't ask me more about that.
I wasn't going to.
No, but this basically, the reason it's really important to clarify that's not nuclear-armed is that it complies with Australia's obligations under the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons.
Fantastic.
So the submarine deal is set to cost $368 billion. We could fund everything nice with that, I'm pretty sure. When I read that, I go, okay, so my dental isn't in fucking Medicare and I can't get free psych sessions and et cetera, because the men wanted to build some submarines with nuclear propulsion technology.
But I do understand the Indo-Pacific concerns. That's still there. That's still relevant.
Yes. I think for me, though, I look at that and go, in order to kind of increase the trust and the vision of our alliance, probably it's not about the submarines, it's about whether fucking Donald Trump's in office. You know what I mean? It's very difficult to look at that and go, we're safe now. So the deal that's costing us that much money is going to occur over the next 3 decades. And this is one of the other criticisms of AUKUS, right? This is not going to happen in the next 5 years. This is a long-term investment with a lot of unease because of things like the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So it's the largest and most expensive defence acquisition in Australian history. This isn't just a development for our military. It's a technological development, which is really important to understand. I also want to mention briefly, this really put our relationship with France at the time into major problems.
Why did France care?
Because we already had a $90 billion contract with France because we were going to supply them with diesel-electric attack-class submarines. And Morrison had secret negotiations and abruptly cancelled the French contract. And then Emmanuel Macron recalled ambassadors from Canberra and Washington, accused Australia of lying. It was this huge breach of trust. Scott Morrison allegedly leaked text messages. It was just a bit fucked up, right?
I actually do vaguely remember that now that you've said that.
Now I want to talk about what's happening at the moment. When I say this is a long-term investment, we're talking that the first US-made submarines are expected to be delivered by the early 2030s, but that we're not going to begin domestic manufacturing until at least 2040 in Adelaide, I believe. This is how far away we're talking. When we're talking about current tensions, this is not a short-term solution. So now we need to talk about the fact that this unease has come from it being placed under review. So Prime Minister Anthony Albanese confirmed during a press conference in Canberra that a full and ongoing review of AUKUS spending and deliverables is currently underway. Reportedly, because of ballooning costs, concerns over supply chain, and basically whether Australia has the labour force and capacity to hold up our end.
Right, okay.
Right. So Albanese is framing it as responsible governance, not as the US potentially backing down. But that's
Do people
essentially
think that it's the US backing down?
This is a huge risk right now, is that there's this huge investment going to be taking place and it's all about the trust and alliance and we might be losing.
Why would the US want to back down? I thought Trump would fucking love some submarines.
Well, the review is currently being managed by the US National Security Committee alongside the Department of Defense. And so we're waiting for as early as July for the first findings. But this is really probably also to do with Trump's economic plan and saying we're looking and reviewing all our investments and who's trustworthy.
Oh, the Doge of it all.
Yeah, but also I can't say what the mentality of Donald Trump is because I'm not sure I could ever stoop that low. But I think it's tough to tell. There's probably a few things at play. He wants to probably look powerful and hold it over and intimidate and control and cause friction and probably try to force Albanese to kind of submit to him in a way, and Keir Starmer. But it also could be to do with legitimate concerns. I don't know.
If Trump is the problem here, if that's what they're like, just to pause it until there's someone else they can negotiate with.
This is a US review. This is probably him just like exerting some power and control to increase bargaining power. Again, I don't know because I'm only recently coming to be an AUKUS expert. I'm new to the game. I'm new to the field. But we can understand how this kind of disruption and destabilization has taken place in the Trump administration. Scott Morrison, thank you for joining the conversation, sir, has said in an op-ed for The Australian, walking back AUKUS now would send the worst possible message to our allies and the region. And he criticised any indication of softening as a dangerous appeasement signal to China. We know that Albanese will be meeting with Trump during the G7 summit, which started on Saturday. So there's likely to be new information after these discussions throughout the week. My guess that would be Trump would have a good talk with Albanese and Keir Starmer. This will all be fine. But I think Trump is all bark, no bite.
Yeah.
So I can see this moving forward, but I think it's, again, one more thing in a long line of disruptions and destabilizations from the Trump administration.
Alex Cooper has released a 2-part doco-series detailing her live show, her career path, and enduring years of sexual assault at the hands of her college soccer coach. I actually watched this last night.
Yes. How long is it?
It's 2 parts. They're about an hour each, roughly. It's called Call Her Alex. It debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival, which is a very big deal. And it follows Alex as she prepares for her live tour to start and her getting married to her husband, Matt Kaplan, who's in it a lot, and also interviewing Kamala Harris. And if you don't know who Alex Cooper is, very quickly, she is the host of the Call Her Daddy podcast. I think what I found interesting about it as well, just speaking on it in general, is it's kind of almost ironic because she's so known for oversharing and talking about her sex life. That's what made Call Her Daddy in the first place. She was going and talking about things that no one was really willing to do. But it was very focused on sex, and it was really interesting for me in this format to then hear from Alex and hear more about that, like, early years growing up, much more vulnerable, a lot more business. That's the stuff I find really interesting about her, especially her being in the podcasting space that I don't see too much of. So I loved it for those reasons, just like seeing that career path insight. But one of the biggest reveals in it that made headlines was talking about the sexual harassment that she endured from her soccer coach. And it was really gut-wrenching to hear about, obviously, because Alex Cooper, and I'm not sure everyone did realize this if you're not like a big Call Her Daddy fan, but she was an incredible D1 athlete.
I didn't know that.
She was a D1 athlete at a full scholarship, Boston University. Like, she was really, really good at soccer. There's this part in the documentary where her mum says that she was so thrilled to select Boston University. She had other offers. She chose Boston University because there was an impressive female coach there.
Head coach, yeah.
Actually, to quote from the series and speaking about when Alex started on the team in 2013, she said, "I was determined to make a name for myself in that field. So when my coach started to pay extra attention to me, I figured it was probably because I was playing well. My sophomore year, everything really shifted. I started to notice her really starting to fixate on me way more than any other teammate of mine. And it was confusing because the focus wasn't like, you're doing so well, let's get you on the field, you're going to be a starter. It was all based on her wanting to know who I was dating, making comments about my body, and her always wanting to be alone with me." And then eventually this coach would request to see Alex in her office one-on-one. And when she would bring Alex in, she would just intensely stare at her and then would sit next to her on the couch and just like put a hand on her thigh. Alex didn't say anything about it to her family for a really long time because she felt if she didn't play by this coach's rules, then like her scholarship would be at risk. And also like when you were a D1, like that is your identity, that's your life. And so to quote again, she said, "It was the psychotic game of, you want to play? Tell me about your sex life. I have to drive you to your night class. You have to stay in the car with me alone." And every time that Alex would try and resist her, she would tell her that there would be consequences. And there were consequences. But another really awful part of this was Alex had a best friend on the team who was also her roommate at college, also called Alex. And this Alex is interviewed in the documentary and supported the whole, like, yes, every time we would like review tape in the room, she would talk about the other players, but then she would just include a minute worth of Alex and go, look at her in her uniform, look at those legs. But also that teammate, when Alex Cooper started to resist this coach a bit more, the coach dropped her friend Alex from the team, who was also on a scholarship. Completely out of nowhere. And this other Alex is there talking about like, that was my identity. That's everything I work for. And there was no explanation for why I got dropped from the team, except for that coach then turning to Alex Cooper and saying, see what I did to your friend? And eventually Alex Cooper told her parents about it, and they kept a very detailed record of absolutely everything that happened. Like, dated it right the way back. Got lawyers involved, went to Boston University, went to the head of the athletics department, sat down with them, told them everything and said, here is every single piece of evidence. Here is all the facts. The university did not even glance at the evidence, didn't even pick it up. And they immediately said that they're not going to fire the coach. But if she wanted to stay at the school and keep her scholarship, she could. But she's not on the team then.
This is crazy.
Mm-hmm. So Alex didn't play her final year. But like, that would have been so devastating. And Nancy Feldman, who was the coach, continued to earn coaching accolades. And the city of Boston even declared December 11th Nancy Feldman Day until she retired in 2022 after 27 years. I will say, after this documentary came out, Boston University has responded and said that they have a zero tolerance policy for sexual harassment and a robust system of resources, support, and staff dedicated. We encourage members of the community to report any concerns. No, well, clearly you fucking don't.
Yeah, it's just...
What?
These statements are so obvious.
It's just such an awful abuse of power, and I think it's really interesting to look at the way that it shaped her approach to call her daddy. I mean, really, I feel like that in ways makes sense and ties into the fact that it was all about taking control and having agency over your sex life and your sexuality. And I feel like this just put a whole new lens on how I view that podcast now, to be honest. And it was also just interesting to learn about her upbringing too when you watch it. She had this incredible home life. She seems to have incredible parents and support system, but like, she was bullied constantly at school by boys for not being attractive to them. And so soccer for her as well was to be around other women. She did not like boys, and they were pretty ruthless to her. And again, you can see how that has informed how she went about Call Her Daddy as well. It's really interesting. And also just to see her producer brain tick throughout it, and like how she's made all those business moves. And because she'd always wanted to be in film, so she has hours and hours and hours and hours of tape as a child producing and teaching herself iMovie. And like, she really was the genius behind all of it from the start. So I just love that. And I also love the final thing I'll say, getting to know Matt Kaplan as well, who, fun fact, was actually married to Claire Holt for a while.
Who's
who was
Claire Holt?
H2O, but also Vampire Diaries, the Australian actress.
Yep.
But just seeing how Matt and Alex work together and their wedding, they're clearly so motivated and business partners as well. I feel like we had this conversation all the time about women that are super successful and like talking about their lives online and talking about their sex life. Like, she was like, it obviously wasn't easy to date. So to find someone who was quite unique to be able to handle that is just such a thing when you hear from so many successful women. It was like, you really had to find someone who was going to work with you, not against you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I will watch this now.
Okay, we are now at the Q&A for this week. A big thank you to Verve Super for sponsoring this Q&A again for us. And we have a question. It was actually a comment left on Spotify, and I thought it was like a good call-out moment, talking about the recent Small Talk episodes and asking for more on friendship dynamics and stuff like that. I love when we see comments like that, because it is so useful to know sort of what you guys want to hear in that as well. And so much feedback from the last 2 episodes in particular. And this week, we actually have Laura Henshaw, which I'm so excited for, because she's just so lovely. She's also just found out that she's expecting a baby, which if you know Laura and been following that story, that's really big news. But we're actually talking about skinny talk and like the wellness trends that are actually quite toxic but being branded as wellness. And it's like a bit of a bombardment online right now, which is something my algorithm constantly falls into.
No matter how many times it's not interested, it thinks that all women are interested in being thinner.
Genuinely. But thank you to people that have been sending in suggestions for small talk and big talk. And please continue to. But thank you so much again to Verve Super for sponsoring this episode. We'll see you tomorrow for Big Talk, actually. It is Big Talk again tomorrow.
See you Thursday for Small Talk. And then we'll see you next Tuesday.
Big Talk is, because it was an overwhelming reaction when I've said that on the story, is going to be the witch trials as well. So I'm so excited.
Very exciting.
See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday. This episode is brought to you by Verve Super.
The super system was built by men for men.
It's an unfair game and no accident that women retire with 25% less than men on average.
Done playing by the rules not made for us?
Visit vervesuper.com.au.
Info provided as general. Read the PDS and TMD issued by ETSL at vervesuper.com.au and consider if right for you.